Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the content patch for the 23rd of July 2013. My name is TotalBiscuit with today's gaming news and comment. Coming up in the show, the Federation of German Consumer Organizations announces a lawsuit against Valve over their refusal to allow the resale of games. The Classification Board in Australia is meeting again to have another look at Saints Row 4. Classic IPs such as Master of Orion and Total Annihilation find new homes, and we'll be looking at the games that you can expect to be coming out this week. All this and the OC Remix track of the day is coming your way right about now. The Federation of German Consumer Organizations has issued a statement that says they intend to take Valve to court over its refusal to comply with a recent European court ruling that stated it was okay, and indeed the right of consumers to sell licenses for digital products that they previously bought. What this would essentially open the floodgates to would be the sale of digital products pre-owned. So you would be able to take a game and you would be able to sell it on once you were done with it, regardless of the fact that it wasn't a physical CD or a box. Now, as it stands, Valve apparently hasn't actually received this lawsuit yet. They have just read the statement on the subject, but it looks like this is going to be a thing. There is no fixed date for the trial as of yet. And this would be the second shot that this organization has taken at Valve following a cease and desist order in September 2012, which was on the subject of changes that Valve made to its end-user license agreement to prohibit their customers from engaging in class action lawsuits against the company. Now, of course, I wouldn't disagree with attempts to say to Valve, "I quit that." They certainly wouldn't be the first company to do it, and I doubt they would be the last. Class action lawsuits are, of course, one of the only practical ways that small consumers can take on big companies and do so in a financially reasonable manner. For the most part, however, they are designed to be punitive against the company. They don't really benefit the people all that much. The payment is usually not large enough to actually amount to anything after the legal fees and how much it costs to pay the lawyers and so on and so forth. And then, of course, you take the rest and you split it among thousands and thousands of people and you might get 10 quid if you're lucky. Whatever the case, the situation right now has been brewing for a while, and it's probably best that it does go to court so the damn thing gets sorted out. I think it's fairly important that we have a discussion on the subject of digital rights and what exactly it is that you actually own when you purchase a product. Do you own it? Well, up to this point, no, you don't. You own access to it. You own a license to use it under certain conditions, and that's pretty much what the PC digital industry is actually based on. You cannot resell these products. It's as simple as that. You also can't resell your whole account, which I do disagree with that, by the way. I think if you wish to transfer your game collection, then you should be allowed to do so. I mean, technically, you can't even transfer it to your son. It's like, here, have my games collection. Nope, not technically allowed to do that. So, it would certainly be nice, especially considering that these things have a significant amount of value. But let's talk about the individual resale of digital titles. And this is where things start to get interesting, isn't it? Because this is my home turf. I'm sorry, it is. This is PC. This is where I feel most comfortable discussing things. When I last talked about used games, it was very much about consoles. A lot of people disagreed with me. However, I think you'll probably find that less people will do so here, considering that the first thing a lot of people are going to tell you is, well, you know what's probably going to happen if you're allowed to resell your games on Steam? Well, there's probably not going to be crazy sales anymore, because those sales were supported by the fact that the companies knew you could not resell that product. Yeah, and that is why things are allowed to be that cheap. There is a reason why consoles don't do that. You cannot acquire those games as cheaply outside of the pre-owned market. It's very, very rare. Every now and again, you'll notice something very, very cheap, but you will not see these massive sales where big AAA titles are discounted down to $5 and things like that. You just won't. I mean, I'm looking at it right now, and I'm seeing Borderlands 2, 66% off, Civ 5, 75% off. 2/3 off Dishonored, down to $10. It was originally $60. You don't see that level of discounts on the console. Why is that, you might ask? Well, what happens when someone says, oh, look, a big sale. I'm going to buy a bunch of copies of this because I know it's going to go back up in price, and then I can resell it later on. That's what can end up happening, and it severely undermines the ability of companies to actually sell their products at a reasonable price. You might say, oh, it makes no difference because someone bought it during the sale, then sold it on. Yeah, but it's fairly easy to buy multiple copies of video games. It's fairly easy to have multiple Steam accounts, and suddenly that one guy buying a game on a sale actually becomes the equivalent of 7 to 10 guys buying it on a sale. And it goes on and on and on like that. And there's all sorts of possible problems with that I don't think this particular organization is fully considering. That's assuming, of course, they even understand what's going on. Has there been a large desire from consumers when it comes to dealing with Steam to be able to trade their games, to be able to sell their games? As far as I know, there hasn't been. Now, this has not been a massive outcry here. The original court case was about a product that cost thousands of euros. We're talking about heavy-duty Oracle database stuff. We're not talking about $5 games here. The problem is, of course, that could potentially set a precedent which says, yeah, you can resell pretty much everything. I don't think that this would work out well. I really don't. You talk about consumer benefit. Well, what consumer benefit is there to essentially killing the site that provides the biggest sales in the games industry, If you want to acquire games cheaply, all you need is a copy of Steam and some patience, and you will get that. I think the problem with this argument is its principles versus practicality, yeah? By principle, I agree that you should be able to resell something that you own. Practically, however, the actual consumer damage this would probably do far exceeds its benefit. We currently see Steam as the biggest place to get great bargains when it comes to sales. It is possible, although not 100% confirmed, that the reason why these sales happen so often, why they're so deep in discounts, is because the companies know that these games cannot be resold. Ergo, it is possible that if you were to allow for pre-owned PC sales on Steam, then these big Steam sales and huge discounts simply wouldn't happen anymore. And as a direct result, you'd actually have consumers saving less money than they previously were. Principles versus practicality in this case. I am, however, very glad that this is going to court because it is a matter that needs to be discussed. We've got to figure out exactly where we are with this stuff. Technology has, as usual, exceeded the bounds of the law and is way ahead of it, so we need an update. We really need to figure out what it is that people have the right to when it comes to things that are intangible. We're talking about digital products, licenses to exact duplicates, as opposed to a physical thing built of physical materials that we have the right to do whatever we want with because we purchased. It's a tricky situation. Saints Row 4 has been resubmitted to the Australian Classification Board after its refusal on the 19th of June, which was supposedly due to the alien anal probe gun that was available to be used on civilians. This is as far as we know at any rate. One assumes that this version is a censored edition, most likely with that particular weapon either reworked or removed completely, and attendees of PAX Australia have confirmed that they were showing something called the Saints Row 4 Australian Edition. One has to wonder if that'll just be straight up censorship or exactly how they intend to pull that off. Unfortunately, previous versions of video games that were censored in Australia ended up being pretty terrible, including the Australian version of Left 4 Dead 2, which was not merely censored, it was also a buggy, horrible mess with corpses disappearing almost immediately and a complete lack of actual proper feedback when it came to your attacks due to no blood whatsoever. Not exactly great for a zombie game, is it? No, absolutely not. So I can't imagine that the removal of this one element, assuming that that is exactly what got the damn thing banned in the first place, would have a big impact on the integrity of the title. I certainly do not agree, as I've said before, with the Australian Classification Board meddling in this respect. It seems kind of ridiculous that you can put in place a rating that says, yep, adults are allowed to make this choice. So here we go, we have a rating just for adults. It's illegal to sell to kids, which, by the way, I'm entirely fine with. I am utterly okay with that. That is absolutely fine by me. But then you get down to it and say, well, we kind of think that adults can make their own decisions, but there's certain things we'd like to make decisions for them on, and then try to apply them to ridiculous situations like this. God damn it. Unfortunately, it seems like they've got an awful long way to go when it comes to understanding the idea that an adult can indulge in this fantasy fictional entertainment in whatever way he so pleases. That's up to the adult. It is not up to the Australian Classification Board, at least that's how it should be. Unfortunately, right now, it very much is up to the Australian Classification Board, and I'm hoping this will shine a light on the fact that this has clearly not been resolved to the fullest as of yet, and there are further changes that need to be made. final list of IPs acquired in the THQ auction has been released, which has revealed a couple of interesting things, including the acquisition of the Total Annihilation franchise, as well as Master of Orion by Wargaming World Limited. Wargaming, of course, now becoming a rather large and extremely wealthy company, being in charge of the title World of Tanks. And there are also a couple of other interesting acquisitions, including the Battlezone franchise, which is actually being picked up by Rebellion. A very interesting pickup there. And we also have the Star Control franchise, which was grabbed by Stardock. I mean, that, as far as I'm concerned, is amazing news. Stardock getting hold of that. Although it is a little strange that Wargaming got Master of Orion when Stardock made Galciv, which was probably the next best thing. Stardock did bid for Master of Orion, but they were the backup bidder. Wargaming is the one that managed to pick that one up. But them getting Star Control is pretty cool. I think that they have the means to make that work. Course, they could also give it to another developer and then publish the title. We may very well see someone like Ironclad, who's responsible for Sins of a Solar Empire, currently working on Sins of a Dark Age, get a hold of this one. Star Control seems like it would fit them quite nicely. Now, the thing about Total Annihilation is that it might seem a little weird that Wargaming picked it up, but guess who's employed by Wargaming? Yes, indeed, that would be Chris Taylor. That would be the person that made Total Annihilation in the first place. So that certainly makes far more sense than you might imagine, and it could indeed result in a Total Annihilation 2, which would be a nice thing to go along with Planetary Annihilation, which is currently being worked on by other ex-Cave Dog employees, as well as guys that worked on Supreme Commander. I certainly don't see this as being a bad thing, although one has to note that Chris Taylor's record has been somewhat checkered. He had some very odd ideas about Supreme Commander, and Subcom 2, in my opinion, was a significantly worse game. He made some very bad decisions in terms of what the game was doing with its economy. Also, Dungeon Siege 3 was not particularly good, and then we just don't talk about Space Siege anymore. I just don't think that's too reasonable. Also, I didn't really like Demigod either. I don't think they did a particularly good job there. I mean, lately he has not, I have to say, done all that many good things. But in the past, he also worked on some really good stuff. So we'll see. Wargaming basically has unlimited budget at this point, so if there was any external factor that was influencing Chris Taylor in the wrong direction when it came to stuff like Demigod or Subcom 2, then we might very well see a much better game. At least the damn IP isn't in limbo anymore, and hopefully something can actually be done with it. And finally, let's have a look at the releases this week as the Steam sale comes to a close. Thankfully, that puts us in a situation where people can actually release games on Steam again and not have them horribly ignored. So it is entirely possible that we might see some interesting titles coming our way. Okay, I'm afraid there aren't all that many interesting titles coming our way. I'd love to tell you otherwise, but no, not really. So, what's coming out? We've got, on July the 23rd, The Raven Legacy of a Master Thief. That is coming to PC and PlayStation 3. That is an episodic point-and-click adventure set in the 1960s, and it's all about an art thief by the name of The Raven. You will be supposedly playing both sides of this, the detectives and the Raven, kind of, I suppose, in a Fahrenheit/Indigo Prophecy kind of style. So, it's a point-and-click. I don't know much more about that, I'm afraid. The Smurfs 2 on all platforms, July the 23rd. Yeah, based on the film, as you might imagine, it'll be Drek. Stealth Inc., A Clone in the Dark, which I thought was actually a sequel to Stealth Bastard Deluxe. It actually isn't. It's been renamed because you're not allowed to call things Stealth Bastard on PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Vita. But hey, another game for PlayStation Vita. That's always nice, right? Do Not Fall makes its way to the PlayStation 3 on July the 23rd, which is a 3D platformer featuring constantly collapsing floors. Yes, and that is it. It's also coming to Xbox and to PC a little bit later. What else have we got? Chaos Rings, you'll be able to pick that up if you want to on PlayStation Mobile. It's not very good anyway, so it's probably not really worth having. It was really notable for being one of the first real RPGs that came out on iOS in 2010, but it wasn't very good, at least in my honest opinion, so that might be worth avoiding. Don't worry, guys, there is actually a real game coming out this week by the name of Shadowrun Returns on July the 25th, that being the big release for core gamers this week. A revival by Harebrained Schemes of the older Shadowrun universe, Very much looking forward to some Cyberpunk RPG action. I do have a preview code of that, so I'm hoping to bring you something once the embargo lifts, which will be on launch day. Last thing that's coming out, which might be interesting to some people, would be Rugby Challenge 2 on July the 25th. That's actually coming out for PC, unusually enough, so hey, sports game fans, there you go. That's pretty much it. Sorry, there's not much else that's really worth having, although there's a couple of titles I would like to point out that you might have missed that came out last week. The first thing is Attack of the Friday Monsters: A Tokyo Tale, which is a 3DS eShop game by Level 5. They've lately been making some pretty unusual games, and this is a rather weird card-based life sim game about kaiju and the people who live in the cities close to them, which is strange to say the least. So that might be worth looking into as something a little bit out of the ordinary. And if you have a phone, if it happens to be an Android phone, do yourself a favor. Especially if you have friends. Actually, only specifically if you have friends or family members. Get Space Team. Space Team's hilarious. Space Team is a game about trying to keep your ship alive by twiddling various knobs and taking various actions in order to stop it from exploding. However, the way you do this is by telling your friends who are also playing it on their phone, who each have a different control console, to take a specific action. It's ridiculously fun. Absurdly so. It was actually a free game on iOS, so I can't imagine they actually charge for it on Android either. I would strongly recommend you check that one out. It is a lot of fun. It really is. It's a great little party game. Also, please buy the in-app purchases for that, because it is a bunch of extra content for the game, and the guy that made this made basically nothing off it. It was really upsetting. It's a very interesting new concept when it comes to multiplayer with an asymmetrical idea to it, and yet he made next to nothing, which sucks. So hopefully an Android release will resolve that problem. Alright folks, that is me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the content patch. Before I go though, I'd like to give you the OC remix track of the day. Everybody knows Ghosts and Goblins. Less people know Ghouls and Ghosts for the Commodore 64. Most people know the soundtrack of Ghosts and Goblins. Less people know the Commodore 64 soundtrack. A little bit different. This is by a remixer called Binster, and this is called Poltergeist Mix, which is a remix of the song from Level 4 of this particular title. I like this a lot. Good use of both synth and chip styles in this particular title. Fairly lo-fi, but in a good way, and nice and catchy. So enjoy this one. It's called Poltergeist Mix, and I'll see you next time.